Good afternoon, East Harlem. Thank you and welcome to Union Settlement's first East Harlem Youth Town Hall to discuss the topics of COVID-19, Census 2020, and youth resources. My name is Michael Parker. I'm the Regional Director of the East Harlem Youth Opportunity Hub, and we'd like to thank everyone for tuning in here to hear our wonderful community leaders, young people, and our elected officials to discuss issues that are not only important to them, but to the young people of the East Harlem community. This is very important for us because we feel like due to the times that we're dealing with right now with social distancing and things of the like, that we still should be able to connect with our elected officials and our community. And I think that it's safe to say that our young people have a lot to say and a lot to share. So one of the most important things of the East Harlem Youth Opportunity Hub was not only to create wonderful experiences for our young people, but to kind of elevate platforms just like this that would allow them to share their voice. I would like this opportunity now to introduce the Executive Director of Union Settlement, Mr. David Nocente.
Thank you, Michael, and thanks all of you for joining. For many people watching online that don't know Union Settlement, we've been in East Harlem since 1895, so it's our 125th anniversary, and we provide a broad array of social services, everything from early childhood, after-school programs, senior programs, small business assistance, et cetera. We're both a social service organization and a social justice organization. And so at times of crisis like this, we're always advocating for this neighborhood, which is so greatly affected by COVID, and advocating for services for people who are deeply affected by it. So I really want to make sure we get to the questions because that's why I'm here to listen. I'm going to turn it quickly over to Sheila Wells, our Associate Executive Director for Early Childhood and Youth Programs. Sheila?
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure to see all these young people on today's town hall. Truly, this is about you. This is your moment. I know you have extraordinary questions for our elected officials, and so I applaud you for your ability to stand up and be the youth voice for East Harlem young adults. So without further ado, I wish you all a joyous week, and I will kick it over back to Michael Parker.
Thank you, Sheila. Thank you. I think it's important right now that we will introduce our young people. And how are these young people selected? The East Harlem Youth Opportunity Hub has a various of community partners and stakeholders. Throughout our conversations with our community partners and stakeholders, one of the things that we felt that was mostly important was that our young people allow an opportunity to speak and have a voice. Many of our community partners either have policy councils, leadership councils, or just young people that were eager to either lend a hand in speaking about their community or just participating in this wonderful event. Each one of our partners have selected 2 youth representatives who we're calling youth ambassadors to speak on behalf of their organizations and the young people of their community. Right now, I would like to introduce, but first, let me first thank Manhattan News Network, the El Barrio Firehouse, for live streaming this event and supporting us through this whole experience for our young people in our community. Now, let me first introduce our young people. We have Demetrius Harris, who is representing Save East Harlem. Raheem Freeman, who's representing Save East Harlem. Elijah Massenberg, who's representing Boys Club of New York. Devon Van Putten, who's representing Boys Club of New York. Tosh Jordan, who's representing KR3TS, Keep Rising to the Top. William Lopez, who's representing Youth Build East Harlem. Rebecca Stout, who's representing KR3TS. Natasha Rodriguez, who will be representing Children's Aid Society. Brandon Velasquez, who will be representing Children's Aid Society. Madison Smith, who will be representing Scan Harbor. And Miss Naikwa Watley, who's also representing Scan Harbor. Welcome, young leaders. Thank you for coming to the Youth Forum. Our first elected official who will, and also I apologize, I would like to welcome our elected officials. We have State Senator Jose M. Serrano, who will be joining us on the call in the live stream. Thank you for joining us, Senator. Councilmember Diana Ayala, who will be joining us from the New York City Council. Borough President Gail Brewer, who will be representing us. And Assemblyman Robert Rodriguez, who will be representing us. Our first question will go to State Senator Jose Serrano. And this question is from Natasha Rodriguez from the Children's Aid Society.
All right.
Natasha would like to ask a question in regards to COVID-19. Natasha, the floor is yours.
All right. Hello. Thank you everyone for being here. My question is, do we ask all of our questions or just one right now?
You can ask one for right now.
All right. So my first question is, how will the budget cuts due to COVID-19 impact youth programs this coming year, and how will it affect census funding? Because many of the programs that are represented here, they rely a lot on funding from the state.
Well, thank you very much for the question, and I'd like to thank all of the hosts, Union Settlement, and all involved for giving me the opportunity to be part of this really important and, in a way, historic conversation when you consider the unprecedented times that we're living in right now with COVID-19. And it's so wonderful to be hearing questions and concerns from the youth from East Harlem and beyond, because this is such a critical juncture in determining and learning what we can do for our youth in the years going forward. There's no telling how long we will be dealing with COVID-19. Obviously, I would guess until we have a vaccine, and that may be a ways away. So in the meantime, we have to live our lives and we have to do things and we have to plan for a future and for a community. So it's important that the youth are very much involved. And I would say that when this first got really hot and heavy, late February, early March, and there were discussions about closing public schools, and some people were running around saying, oh, this is going to be horrible. Kids are going to be in the street. They're going to be running amok. And none of that happened, because in our community and throughout New York City, we have some of the most thoughtful, intelligent teenagers anywhere. And they care very deeply about their community, about the political process, about civics. Today's forum, I think, is a shining example of the intellect and the passion of the students and the youth in our community. So just wanted to sort of throw that in from the beginning. But to answer your question, these budget cuts are problematic for a lot of the programs that we took for granted as being there year after year. And there's two pots of money to talk about here. We have state money that funds programs, and we have city money. And I know that the city budget is being worked on right now. They have an upcoming deadline. On the state level, we closed down our budget process at the end of March. April 1st is when we enacted our state budget. And it was not a good budget. It was draconian by any measure. And there was a tremendous shortfall in funding. Now, by law, we have to balance our budgets, meaning that just like if you have a checking account and you have, well, in my day, we had bank books. I don't think people use bank books too much now, but anyway, I don't want to show my age here. But you had to reconcile your bank accounts. You had to ensure that the amount that you were taking out reflected the amount that you had, and you couldn't just take out more than you had. So unfortunately, with the state of New York, we have to balance our budget. But because of COVID-19, there was a multi-billion-dollar shortfall that had to be closed. And of course, people like myself who believe wholeheartedly that we needed to hold harmless as much as we could the programs that affected our community, that had the most benefit long term, that paid the most dividends. And we did our best to hold harmless, but as we're seeing, nothing was spared from the chopping block. And on the city level, I know there's concerns, and I saw Councilmember Ayala, who's on the call now. She could speak more to it because I know she's in the middle of fighting to maintain that funding. But the youth employment programs that are so critically important for our community, there's debate about how we will be able to maintain the funding for those. So I believe that we need real relief from the federal government, meaning that when the Congress and the US Senate come together and formulate a future relief package for the nation with money that goes to states, I believe that unlike the previous relief package, the funds that are given to us, we as a state should have the flexibility to move it around and plug holes in education and youth programming and so on and so forth. Without these restrictions that are put on us by the federal government, which oftentimes are not very kind to communities of color. Let's be frank. In the world of Trump, this is unfortunately the world that we're dealing with. So I think it's critically important that our congressional delegation, our Senate, our US Senate, find ways to ensure that the next federal stimulus package provides states with money that they have the flexibility to fill these holes.
Senator,
So go ahead, I'm sorry.
no, I'm sorry. I think what I wanted, and I thank you for your remarks. I think what I wanted to also ask on behalf of the young people, for sake of being a dean of students before, is if a young person doesn't know what a state senator does, right? And this is the first time that they actually met a state senator. And I think this question is also for all of our elected official guests who've now joined us. Let them know exactly what your role is and how impactful that they can be in the role of what you're doing for anybody that's tuning in for the first time. And if you can you keep it to 30 to 35 seconds so that I can get everybody else an opportunity to speak, and then we can pass it over to the young people. I really appreciate it.
Awesome. No, you're absolutely right. So, a state senator, we're elected to represent all of you in Albany in the state legislature. We represent districts that cover roughly about 350,000 people. My district is a 29th Senate district, which covers the South and West Bronx, Randall's Island, Roosevelt Island, East Harlem, Yorkville, Central Park, and the Upper West Side. It's a very big district, covers a lot of different neighborhoods. This is my 20th year in public office, and the work that we do is to go to Albany to work with our colleagues from all sides, Republicans, Democrats. We come together and in the Senate chamber, and one of the most important things we do is hammer out a state budget. And it's a roughly $175 billion state budget, which covers everything from education funding to a lot of the larger state programs that we take for granted. So we're elected every 2 years, and it really is it's a wonderful job, and I appreciate the work that everyone's doing on this.
Thank you so much, Stacey. I really appreciate it. I wanted to bring in Assemblyman Robert Rodriguez. Thank you, Assemblyman Robert Rodriguez. I seen you just jumped in. Briefly, let our young people know, what do you do? Where's your office located? What impact that you have in the roles of their lives and the great programs that's going on in the community. And if you can, a brief 60-second update on updates of your office in regards to COVID, youth resources, and census. Thank you, Assemblyman.
Sure. So similar to the role of the state Senate, it's just the number of people that we represent. The Senate district is a little bigger than the Assembly district. It encompasses us and other neighborhoods, but really we're the representatives we're your voice in state government. As was mentioned, there's a couple of ways that we do that. I feel like we're two voices. We're the voice before COVID and the voice after COVID. Because really right now, we're all operating in kind of crisis management mode, getting all the institutions that we all serve and represent the resources that they need to be able to do what they do. So first being healthcare organizations and nursing homes, and making sure they have the equipment, the PPE, personal protective equipment that they need to be able to do their jobs, making sure that we provide food security for folks in all of our neighborhood, and more importantly, making sure that we advocate for our state to get the resources they need at this point from the federal government. And I know a lot of the discussion that we're going to have is talking about different programming that is important to our community. Some are youth-oriented programming, but also we know that our small businesses need additional resources. And as well as the nonprofits and the social service organizations that we have here now. All of those are eligible to be supported through the federal funding that we're all out there advocating for. And the senator mentioned, the next round of stimulus, but there's even the last round of stimulus, and making sure that goes to help support those things that are important to us. Part of what we'll be working on this week, the senator and I, is we're going into session remotely to talk about rental support and a rental assistance program, because we've heard loud and clear from our constituents that that is a big concern and something they're intensely worried about, and that we have to begin to address using some of the money that we got from the federal government already. So that's what we're supposed to be doing. We listen to our constituents. We try to figure out how we address some of these problems and concerns, and then also, make sure that everybody can stay in their home, have food during the crisis, and then are able to think about what life looks like after the crisis. And then I was talking about, things that we work on kind of before things kind of got crazy, in terms of COVID, is really making sure that our neighborhood gets the resources that it needs, making sure that our parks are as good as they are in other communities, making sure we have mass transit, making sure the Second Avenue subway goes all the way to 125th Street. Those are the things that we were fighting for before COVID. It's going to look a little bit differently as we deal with COVID now, and the services that how they get delivered in this post-COVID world is something that we're all going to be dealing with, especially as it pertains to young people and after-school programs. But it's our job and the council members' job and the borough president's job to find the resources to help us make that transition, and keep people safe. So
Thank you, Robert.
Is that all right?
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. I want to pass it over to Councilmember Ayala and then Borough President Brewer. And the same question, updates on your office. What is your role in public policy? And how impactful is the work that you're doing effective to the young people? Miss Councilmember Ayala?
Hi, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you all for being here today, and thank you to all of today's sponsors for putting this together. It's always really important that we hear from our young people, especially in light of a budget like the one that we're about to pass in the city council, in the next few weeks, hopefully. This is going to be a really, really tough year, and a lot of things have happened to you and to us and to the entire community this year that don't look like anything that you may even recognize. And so I wanted you to know that, we're all trying to figure this out together, and that you are really important to all of us on in this conversation. All of the elected officials that showed up today really care about ensuring that you're well protected this summer, that you're well engaged this summer, and that whatever resources you have you've had at your disposition that have helped make your life a little bit easier, continue to be there even beyond this summer and beyond COVID. I'm Councilmember Diana Ayala. I represent East Harlem and the South Bronx. It's known as the 8th City Council District. There are 51 members, and each member represents a specific area. I represent over 180,000 constituents. A constituent is you, and I am a constituent for somebody else. My district is a little bit different. My district, like Senator Serrano, is made up of 2 boroughs. So I represent all of East Harlem from 96th Street all the way to the end of 3rd Avenue and 132nd. And then I cross over the river, the 3rd Avenue and Willis Avenue, and I have all of Mott Haven all the way to 149th and 3rd. Some of you may have gone there shopping or whatever. And I have Highbridge and Longwood and a little bit of the West Concourse. So it's a really big district. It's very diverse, but lots of fun to get to know. And I've had it's been an honor, to represent it in the last 2.5 years. And what I do is I create laws. We help, the city council comes up with laws that help better protect you as an individual, right? So for instance, laws that protect renters, right, from maybe harassment from a landlord, right? Laws that impose fines or fees, maybe if your dog is pooping on the street, right? Laws that help small businesses. And so we do laws, and then we also help balance the budget, right? So we're in the middle of the budget, so the mayor gives to us a budget, and he says, this is what I would like to propose that we do, right? With this year's budget, I would like to cut here and I would like to add here. And then we go through what's called the budget dance, where we negotiate what our priorities are at the city council based on what our experiences are as representatives of each community. And then we try to come to a consensus where we're both in agreement of what the budget will look like that year. And then by law, we have to vote on a budget by the end of June. And so we're in the middle of that process now. And this is my 3rd budget as a council member. And it's been the most difficult because in the last few years we've had a lot of money. We've been raising a lot of money. That means that tourists have been coming into New York City. The city's been making money, and then when we make money, we're able to take that extra little bit from here and there, and we're able to create new programs. We're able to build on SYEP. We're able to get you additional slots. And this year we just don't have it, right? This year we have close to a $10 billion budget gap, and it is our responsibility, like we're required by law to balance the budget. How we get there, however, is part of the conversation now, because we want to ensure that while we're doing that, we're not doing that on the backs of our young people, and we want to make sure that you're protected. So again, I'm Councilmember Ayala, and I thank you for having me here today. I think Michael, hello, somebody lost Mike.
Sorry, can you hear me now? Thank you. So Councilmember Ayala, before I pass it over to Borough President Brewer, Devin from the Boys Club had a question regarding public schools. Devin, what was your question to Councilmember Ayala regarding public schools?
Hi, my name is Devin. This category was really youth resources. So it says I have public schools have been offering free school meals to families that rely heavily on these meals. How long do you think schools will be able to keep doing this?
Councilmember Ayala?
Did it work?
Sorry, I muted myself. So thank you. That's a really good question, and I think that the answer is that we don't know, but we can only estimate that it'll continue to happen throughout the pandemic, right? And until people no longer desperately need that service. Right now, that food is sometimes the only food that some families have access to. So it's important that we make sure that it's readily available. A lot of families lost their jobs, and some families didn't qualify for unemployment, and they don't qualify for SNAP benefits, and they don't qualify for stimulus checks. And so we need to make sure that not only are we continuing to have the grab and go at the schools, but that we continue to invest in our local food pantries and offer different options for food resources in the community.
Thank you, Devin. Thank you, Diana. I want to introduce our last elected official, Borough President of Manhattan, Gail Brewer. Borough President Brewer, are you here?
I am. Thank you very much. Thank you, Michael, and thank you, the Hub, and thank you, Union Settlement, and thank you, East Harlem, and all my wonderful colleagues. So in terms of the office, my district is very easy. It's just Manhattan, and it doesn't have any boundaries except the water, and it includes Marble Hill. It is not in the Bronx. It is in Manhattan, just in case people forget that. There are 5 borough presidents, and each has a very different borough. So our duties are different. I was in the city council, so I know the hard work that they do, and certainly the same in the legislature. But we have 4 main duties. One is to work on land use and zoning. That involves the city council, the mayor, and certainly all of the community boards. The second is to appoint about 1,000 people in the borough of Manhattan, obviously for the community board, but also for cultural boards and business boards and environmental boards and health boards. And I want to just mention, in terms of the community board, working with the city council, we try to have a 16-year-old on every single one of the 12 community boards. So we're very focused on having young people on community boards. And the third thing we do is allocate funding. You heard the city council and the state legislators do the same in terms of capital. So that would be for schools and parks and culturals. And then the fourth is, if we work with a council member, we can introduce legislation. So that's the actual duties. I just want to say in terms of, and then we have a district office on 125th Street, right near Amsterdam. We're the first borough president to have a storefront. You can just walk in, similar to what some of your local elected officials do, but we're the only borough president to have that. The issue of young people and voices. So I indicated that I think every community board now has a 16-year-old. I feel very strongly about that, was the first one to push that. And I want to say there's another bill that I would like to see passed. And it's hard. I don't know that it's going to, but we did have a bill years ago pending, it didn't pass, that said that young people, 16 and 17, should be able to vote in city elections. And I actually support that. So that was first proposed by the Police Athletic League and other organizations. So I don't know, Michael, if that's something that youth groups want to bring up, but I do think that's something that we should be pushing for. I would love to see that pass, and I've been talking about it for about 20 years. And I couldn't get a lot of adults to support it, but I got a lot of non-voting 16 and 17-year-olds to support it. It does exist in about, I think, 3 or 4 cities now. And so it's not the end of, something to, there's precedent.
Right.
The second, of course, is just like everybody else, we have a youth council, and we also often have many, many interns. Last summer we had 150. Obviously won't be as many, but we still have interns during the summer. The next thing I want, go ahead, sorry.
No, I wanted to hear the last update, and I wanted to ask you a question that one of the young people posed to us that I felt was important for you to answer based off the work that you're doing, but please finish.
Okay. So the other thing is in the western part of Harlem, for lack of West Harlem, there was just a grant from the DA's office, and you know more about this than I do, but it's an interesting concept, something that to think about. It was focused on West Harlem, but the grant is giving support to the young people, and some people in their 30s, which to me is young, but it's still not young, who are coming back from any kind of criminal justice situation, and those families will be focused on. And that's something that I would love to see in East Harlem also. I think we've talked about that a little bit. So there'll be an intensive, in a very positive way, what do you need? So that's something to think about. We're all focused on SYEP. Your local officials are focused on it. We had a Zoom, we put letters, we've advocated. So I think the city council and the mayor will come up with some funding, but maybe not the 75,000. There's tons of work to be done this summer, from helping the seniors, the food banks, and just virtual. I just talked to the folks at DOE about summer school, and I'm a little concerned. Obviously, that's elementary all the way to 12, 178,000 young people, a lot of high school students. And I think that's something to pay attention to in East Harlem, where the families are, because if it's just the same as it was during the year, that's not going to work. So I suggest that it has to have, like I actually mentioned, the hub. There have to be other kinds of support for those families. For instance, air conditioning. I love DOE, but they just think DOE. They think silo. But I said, how in the world can you be sitting in a hot room learning? You have to have air conditioning. And the NYCHA has air conditioner. So where there's a young person who's part of the summer school, they should have an air conditioner. So those kinds of little things need to be thought about. They didn't think about. The other thing is laptops. So everybody supposedly has a laptop. That's a supposedly. The DOE has no idea. They're not going to be requested back, certainly for summer school. But here we come, the fall or January. I don't know when we're opening up the schools. And I think we should be thinking about making sure that those young people get to keep those laptops. And better, they need to have new laptops. They need to have laptops and not iPads. That's a whole other discussion. And we need to think about broadband. I've been talking about this, as Robert and Diana know, forever. But we also need to work on the broadband. It's crazy to have slow, to have non-existent, etc. I don't need to get into all specifics, but the whole technology world is now opened up. Some of us have been talking about this forever, and it impacts young people who are trying to learn perhaps more than anybody else, not to mention telemedicine. That's like our secret weapon, because people don't care about young people, but they might care about health and telemedicine. And the doctors are complaining to me that when they do home visits, which some wonderful doctors do, they can't get connections. So I'm just talking generally about some of these topics, and thank you very much. Look forward.
Thank you. So thank you very much to our elected officials. And now I would like to get to the meat of our program, which is the young people. So elected guests, our young people has posed several questions, and we're going to assigned some questions to our young people, to our elected officials. We're asking for sake of time that you keep your responses to 1 minute. And to everybody that's watching us on MNN, thank you. And if you're watching us on Facebook Live, our feed will extend past the 5 o'clock period. So if you're watching us on TV and we go beyond 5 o'clock, you can log on to the MNN Facebook page, the Union Settlement Facebook page, and we're going live on Facebook Live. So our first question will go to Assemblyman Robert Rodriguez. And this question is from Tasheen Jordan from KR3TS. Tasheen?
Yo, what's good, Senator? How you doing? So my question is, with COVID going on, what is the situation with affordable testing?
Assemblyman Rodriguez?
Yep. So testing is a very important element to making sure that we're able to roll that out all over our community. So one of the, we just released a test site, was it the 26th? Today, right, Diana? At Mosaic. Mosaic Prep has that from, I believe, 7 a.m. to 6 p.m. So
That's right.
did I get that right, Diana?
Yes.
Okay, so free testing there for anybody, in addition to it being available at Metropolitan Hospital, as well as at other, more centralized locations. We're going to be working on additional testing sites with Borinquen, but the ones that are probably the most accessible right now are those that I mentioned. We also have a program at Washington Houses that is going to be rolled out into other NYCHA developments. Next up to offer on-site testing in NYCHA is probably going to be Wagner Houses, but there is also an opportunity for us to be able to schedule that with ready responders. So that's going to be another NYCHA-specific testing availability program. So just so to name a few, we've got the Mosaic Prep that's on 111th Street between Lex and Madison, Lex and Park. And then we have Metropolitan Hospital, and you're going to see more availability from the northern part with Borinquen Health Center also making that available.
And they're all free. They're all
free.
And they're all
Thank
free.
you.
And they're all free.
So we're saying that there's testing in our community for young people, and it's all free and it's available to them. That's correct?
Yeah.
Thank you so much,
Absolutely.
Assemblyman. The next question is from Miss Madison Smith from Scan Harbor. Hey, Madison. And this question is for Council Member Diana Ayala. Madison?
Hi. So my question is, how can we put more effort into keeping the youth productive during this pandemic? Because the youth can get very bored and not have much to do. So how can we keep them more productive?
I know. I have 3 of you at home, and no, it's a good question. Right now, you're supposed to be in school, so I think that we're thinking what happens after school is let out, right? So what happens from June to September, because we have to take baby steps. And so one of the things that we're looking at, as you know, has been a topic of conversation, hot conversation for the last few weeks, is really restoring the SYAP program, because we feel that there's a lot of opportunity for young people to help out in the community while also being in an environment that allows them to use social distancing practices while also wearing their masks, right? But they're helping their community. So you could work at a local food pantry, right? Helping to pack up and give out meals. You could deliver meals on wheels. Union Settlement actually has a program here in the community. You can do virtual if you are a young person that has health issues that prohibit you from going outside. So there are so many different programs. We're kind of negotiating that now. We're trying to figure out what the best program, what that program looks like. And I think that's why it's important to have these conversations with you, because then you can kind of tell us, this is what works for me, and this is something that just really wouldn't work for me, right? Like as a mom, I've been fighting because everybody wanted to do virtual. And I said, I don't think the virtual should be the only option, because I see how happy the young people are to be outside and to be helping, and they need fresh air and they need sun in their faces, and they need to be able to talk to other people and see people that are not just their mom and dads and their brothers and sisters all day. So we're fighting really hard, and I think that we'll come up with a solution that hopefully gets all of you into a safe environment, but gets you productive and busy this summer.
Thank you so much, Council Member. Our next question is for State Senator Jose Serrano, and this question is from Ms. Becca Stout from KR3TS. Becca?
Which question? Is
Your
there a
first
specific
question.
one? Or?
The first
Okay.
one.
Okay. So sorry about that.
No problem.
So as a dancer with KR3Ts, a writer and a musician, the arts have always been important to my life. But now more than ever, I feel like we can see the visible impact of the arts on improving mental health and inspiring productivity, creativity, passion, and resilience in people of all backgrounds. With the increase in the creation of videos, blogs, and the recording of new live video concerts in musicians' homes, and the increased access to movies, books, articles, and more. So with this reliance on the arts more legible and visible than ever before, it seems clear that we need to do more to help our dancers, musicians, writers, and artists. However, for years, we've seen a decline in funding for the arts. During this pandemic, funding for the arts has been almost non-existent. How do you and other elected officials plan to acknowledge the need for the arts, and how will you help devote more funding to support the arts in the future?
Well, thank you. That's such a wonderful question, and it's music to my ears, no pun intended. I come from the arts. I worked in the arts before becoming an elected official. I worked for the Public Theater, the New York Shakespeare Festival down on Lafayette Street, and I was there for 6 years before running for office. And in my years that I was there, I saw firsthand how transformative the arts and culture can be. Not only way beyond the aesthetic, but how transformative they can be insofar as providing educational opportunities for people, providing a lot of jobs for our community. For every one person you see that's performing, there's many behind the scenes, set designers, costume designers, dramaturgs, so many people who are making these things happen. And these are wonderful careers. I had such a great time working in the arts. But also the arts historically have been a voice for social justice. Long before politicians became advocates, it was the artists who had the courage to weave into their work the calls for social justice in our society. They were the ones who were courageous enough to point out a lot of the hypocrisy in society and how that was hurting those who are most marginalized in our communities. So the arts really, I think people's deeper understanding of the arts, it has to be expanded beyond it being something that is just an aesthetic, and viewing it as a pillar within our society, where the funding is just as important for the arts and culture as it should be for anything else. Housing, police, and fire, to name a few. I don't like when people pit the arts and culture on one side against funding for other things on the other side. It's equally important. Also, it should be noted that in a city like New York, our greatest economic engine is our culture. They're the reason why people come to New York, not just tourists, but this is the reason why companies want to have their roots in New York City, because of its cultural diversity, because it is the think tank for the arts and creative culture. How do we get past this economic hurdle to put all of this good sentiment into action for the arts? Well, part of it has to be in reframing how we view the arts and culture, and looking at it not simply as something that it's fine if we can afford to do it, but that if we can't support it, you know what, we'll live to see another day. I beg to differ. Without the arts and culture, our communities, our youth will suffer. And the ripples of that suffering will go on for many, many years. So just as important as it is to fund housing and education, we need to find a way to fund our arts and cultural organizations and institutions in a way that allows them to keep going. My fear is that during the age of coronavirus, we're going to lose so many cultural institutions that even in the best of times, we're hanging on by a thread financially. And now that we're dealing with COVID, they may close their doors and may never come back. And that's a sad story for artists. So many artists who I've known over the years who want to continue doing what they're doing, but they can't afford to do it. They can't put food on their table doing what they're
Thank
doing.
you.
So we need to step outside of this and find new and innovative ways to fund it.
Thank you. Sorry, Senator.
Right, I'm sorry. Over the years, I have tried to find new funding mechanisms for arts and artists, also creating artist housing that's affordable, and trying to find other ways for artists to have workable space that's affordable. But again, we need to preach this as a much larger issue than just an aesthetic. Fight for more federal aid to keep our arts institutions open.
Thank you so much, Senator. The next question is for Borough President Gail Brewer, and this question is from Nana. Nana, let them know what program you're representing and your question.
Hi, I'm Nyquasia Watley, everyone. How are you guys doing? Good afternoon. I'm representing Scan Harbor, guys. I'm actually an employee, so I work childcare. So I have like I'm firsthand. So, and I got my job working from winter youth to summer youth. So I want to thank everybody for advocating for that. My first question is, what is the state alternative to fund youth with well-needed school essentials, being that they can't do it themselves this year? So meaning like, since we know that we won't have summer youth, how can the state, and I understand that we are dependent on federal aid and the 20% cuts from the schools and the hospitals and the local governments and all that. I understand that, but we have to think about the youth that, other than we have to like think about the low income youth, and we have to think about the youth that also pays for school and activities from out of pocket, and that we have to think about parents that are out of jobs right now. We have to think about the students' needs. So if we do go back to school, because I'm also in school, I'm in college right now. How will we be able to pay for supplies if our parents are trying to pay for rent and food and just to put clothes on our backs? How are you guys gonna think about and try to even induct our feelings into the funding of things that we need for this school year?
So,
Nana, first of all, congratulations on being so informed on issues. That's impressive all by itself. I really appreciate that. The second is, the budget is like $92 billion, but the interesting, and I would say good news, is the first topic after the mayor said, I'm cutting. There were many cuts, Department of Education, recycling, blah, 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 tons of cuts. The first calls of upset people were about SYEP. And I have to give the young people credit and the youth organizations credit, because it could have been about something else. So you should feel proud that the program has meant so much over the years, that was the first group of people continually complaining and advocating to keep the SYEP. So that's a good thing, because what didn't get lost in the weeds somewhere. The third thing is to the credit of Speaker Johnson and Councilmember Ayala. I've been around a long time, so I have a sort of a sixth sense about what might happen. I don't always know. But I can tell you one thing. I think that last year we had 75,000 young people. That was the largest number, to the mayor's credit. But as the council member said, there was enough revenue coming in from businesses at that point. So I don't know that we're going to get to 75,000. But my feeling is, because, as you so articulately pointed out, people are unemployed. Young people use the money for school, for supplies, for all the things that their parents can't use it for. And you cannot imagine how many people in public or elected or in corporate world started as SYEP. The list is very, very long. So then you have people who have experienced the first job being one that got them where they are now. So you put all these pieces together and you kind of think somehow they, meaning the city, will find funding for some SYEP. The other problem though is not enough. So, you or your friends might get jobs, but others won't. And so there is a little bit of a push now, I know, with the Police Athletic League, for instance, and New York Police Foundation, to come up with private money. And there's tons of jobs that could be done. Diana Ayala gave you some. There's a suggestion that they do mapping. So there's like working with computer and GIS, geographic information system, figure out where the resources are That can be done virtually on a computer, not to mention the food banks and helping the seniors and so on. So I have to congratulate you and all of your colleagues, because number one was SYEP. Now, does that mean it happens? You don't know. The budget is a very, as they say, fluid document. But that's the only thing I can tell you. Plus, you know, maybe there's some federal money and there is state money. The state put in 22 million. But I believe, and the council member could help me, that it has to be matched. In other words, the state's not going to say, oh, New York, you can have 22 million, but oh no, you don't have to match it. So there is money on the state level, but only if the city puts some money in. And the federal government is another story.
Thank you so much, Borough President. Our next question is for Assemblyman Robert Rodriguez, and this question is coming from Mr. Demetrius Harris from Goso State. Demetrius?
All right, how y'all doing? I'm representing SAVE. What question do you want me to ask?
Whatever one you want.
Okay, do you think Census 2020 should be taught in school?
I love that question. I'm gonna add on to Gail's last answer. One of the things that we did last year, in addition to state money for the books and related expenses, is we put together a $20 million Martin Luther King Scholarship Fund. So I want everybody here just to keep an eye on that. That is specifically used to cover not your tuition expenses, but your non-tuition related expenses, food, meals, those kind of things, computers that are not typically covered normally. So just putting that on your radar, is because we've heard this being a consistent issue even before the variety of budget cuts. So for my school folks, there you go. But census is one of those things that is critically important, and it is something that should be taught in school. The problem is that we only have to teach it or remember it once every 10 years, but all this work happens in between to get us to this point. And I'm just going to give you an example of why it matters, right? There were about $150 billion worth of funding that went to the states to help deal with coronavirus and COVID expenses. The formulas for this was driven strictly by population. The number of people who are in New York State and in all of the states determined how much money they got. And so when you hear some of the statistics that, for a COVID case in Alaska, it's $1 million of aid versus $20,000 for aid in New York. That's strictly because it was driven by population numbers, not number of cases, not the place that had the more need, just based on the number of people. And that's where these census numbers tend to really matter. They are the things that are determining how money, resources for youth programs, for education dollars, for healthcare dollars, for pretty much most of the dollars that get distributed on a baseline are done based on just people, number of people in every state, as well as political representation. Basically how many Congress people we have is determined on how many people we have in our state. So that's why this is, it is such an important exercise to happen every 10 years, but you wouldn't know about it because, we don't talk about it until it gets to the point that it's here. And then in between that, we tend to forget why it's so important. So it's kind of like an exercise in making sure that every time we do it, we also understand that it's not just a constitutional responsibility, but it's literally money and representation in our pockets. And it has nothing to do with status, nothing to do with whether you're documented, undocumented, how many people live in your house, what your current situation is with respect to rent. Nobody is checking any of those things. We just need to know how many people are, in that household, in that location at that point, and that information is saved. So all of these details, I wouldn't know if I wasn't so involved in the process and making sure that our count is so good, being, the leader of that task force in the assembly. And I don't think, we've always talked about civics being something that happens more, but this is even, below the radar of civics. This is beyond government, who's representing you, why it's important. This is kind of an exercise that we do, but it has such outsized importance. So I think we should teach that as part of civics, but also for, you as youth leaders in our community and leaders across generations, remind people, influence those people in your household who may have looked at the form and thrown it out, or may not know what the census is and it means. Just let them know how important it is and how secure the process is, and it can be done online or via the phone these days. So thanks for the
Thank you,
question,
Robert.
Michael. And to everybody, please fill out this form. It is one of the best ways to get civically involved while we're unable to leave our homes.
Thank you so much. The next question is for Councilmember Ayala, and this question is from Elijah from the Boys Club of New York. Elijah, are you there?
I am. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
My name is Elijah Massenberg. As Mr. Parker said, I'm with Boys Club of New York. My question is regarding the 2020 census. There's a lot of information going around, but my question regards community organizations and how specifically they would benefit from people responding to the 2020 census. Would there be a direct benefit or an indirect benefit, or not a benefit at all, or would it just have no effect?
Councilmember Ayala?
Yeah, there's always a benefit, right? Because that's where we get our funding. But as Assemblymember Rodriguez said, if our funding is based on population, right? So imagine like if you have a household of 5, right? But you only have the budget to take care of 2 or 3, then you have to stretch, right? And that's not fair to the community or to the people that really need services, and it wouldn't be fair to that family, right? So consider yourself a part of that family. You're a part of the East Harlem, family. If we don't know how many people live here, then we don't know how to accordingly budget. And so that means that there is an effect on everything. It affects how we fund our public hospitals. Actually, Borough President Brewer can tell you one of her deputy borough presidents was instrumental in organizing in Washington Heights the last census. And they did so well that they were able to get, I believe it was 2 additional schools added to that community, right? So if those people had not been counted, those children would have gone, would have been overcrowded in buildings unnecessarily. So there is a direct benefit to filling out the census, and it may not be something that we considered. It might not instinctively catch your attention, but it affects us in everything that we do. The hospitals that we go to, the schools that we go to, the trains, infrastructure work. So it's vitally important that you go home, or if you're home now, that you speak to your parents and ask them, did you complete the census?
Good. Thank you, Diana. Our next question is from Brandon from the Children's Aid Society. And this question is for State Senator Jose Serrano. Brandon?
Yeah, how you doing? 1 second. I have to find my question. I think my question was just basically like, how do we work together with like the police around the neighborhood with them finding people outside without masks or surrounded by big groups and them asking people to step away politely or correctly instead of, a lot of large commotion going on, and how do we work together with them so that way we could avoid any issues in the future?
Right, that's a very good question. There's a long history of over-policing in our community, and that over-policing doesn't make us safer. If the goal is to make our community safer, I think the way that you do it is by having important dialogue, and also the NYPD respecting and understanding and having the cultural competency to work within our community. I think that the latest directives from the City of New York in regards to enforcement of masks and social distancing protocol has been taken sort of away from the NYPD, because there were a few ugly incidents that we saw throughout the media a few weeks ago. It's no longer the case. I think now, at least in my neighborhood where I live in the Bronx, school safety officers around, not so much enforcing, but just giving out masks. And they walk around the parks and they offer masks for free of charge to whoever wants. I think that's got to be the way it's done. Also, a proper public education campaign to let people know, hey, it's in your best interest to wear a mask when you go outside. Even if you think you'll be able to maintain social distancing, once you get outside, that reality might change. So I think it's important that people do their part and wear a mask and stay away from crowds. But at the same time, the police shouldn't be the ones enforcing those rules, because things could get out of hand quickly. And again, we have a long history of over policing in our community. We need to make sure that we don't have any more of that in East Harlem.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Senator. Our next question is from Mr. Remy, and this question is going to Borough President Gail Brewer. Remy?
How you doing, guys? On behalf of Violet with KRPT, she just want to thank of this whole organization of us talking with y'all guys. But my question is, like with New York such as a creative state, you know, I'm not taking it away from any other state, and I'm not taking away from the budget that we have for policing and firehouse. Throughout the years prior to the pandemic, like, why isn't more budgets given, you know, to events and organizations like KRPTs, you know, SCAN, to, you know, provide more just to, you know, to influence and inspire the youth?
Thank you very much for the question, Remy. I would say two things. One, you have a group of elected officials representing you who absolutely 100% agree, whether it's the arts or youth programs like SCAN or the great work that Michael Parker does at Union Settlement. I think, I could be wrong, that if we had the voting of youth, in other words, I talked earlier, I don't know if you're on, to pass a bill that says 16 and 17-year-olds should be able to vote in city elections. That would make a huge difference. So high school kids could actually vote, not for state and not for federal, but for city. That would help. The other issue is, you know, what happens is I wouldn't say it's clear, but you do have development, you do have pushing from, you know, they don't want to get taxed in Albany despite the wonderful work of your state electeds. There's still a push not to tax the billionaires. What we think they should be taxed, as opposed to the middle class and low income people paying more taxes. So, I mean, I don't think the billionaires would miss the money that if they got taxed more heavily, as an example. And we also wanted to tax people who don't live in New York City, but just have an apartment here. Because, you know, how would they even know that they were losing a little bit of money? Pied-à-terre is what it's called. So those are some challenges, and we have not, despite the efforts of your local elected officials who support this, been able to get those fundings added to the budget, so that things like arts and like youth programs. It's very frustrating. I mean, the fact that SYEP is on the chopping block, when I think there could be other programs at DOE that there's a lot of consultants. That's what the papers are talking about. So why are the consultants getting paid and not SYEP, as an example? That was a very clear example in my reading of the budget. So the answer to your question is, you know, electing people, although you have done that in your area, that understand that youth and arts, those are my arts being as high up in my book, and I certainly on the senators, as the young people need to get funded. So it's always a challenge. I don't know how else to say it except we have to keep pushing, because you know, even NYCHA, why isn't NYCHA funded, right? As an example, the $32 billion deficit at NYCHA. It's years and years of not having the kind of voice that I think we have now. It helps a lot that there's a Democrats in the state Senate and not just Republicans. That helps a lot. And if the Democrats had been there 10, 15 years ago, then Senator Serrano and others would have had the funding that you are advocating for. That's the best answer I can give. And we won't even talk about the federal issues. The federal issues have always been, as an example, fund the highways, but not the subway, as an example. There always has been those kinds of pushes. So thank you for your question. Very insightful.
Thank you so much, Borough President. Our next question will be coming from William, and this question is for Assemblyman Robert Rodriguez. William from Youth Action Youth Bill.
Good afternoon, William Lopez from Youth Action Youth Build. My question today for you is, what are the upcoming plans for the next school year, being that this school year is already over? I just got accepted to college, so then they're excited, but I just don't know what's going on. Would it be insightful? So.
Yeah, I think right now we have pressed certainly all the SUNYs and some of the other CUNY institutions to let us know what their plan is going to be for remote learning. I mean, we hope that we're going to be in a position in the fall, where we'll be able to open up as normal. But I think it's still really too early to say whether or not that's the case. So but that doesn't mean that you necessarily have to, defer your educational priorities at all. And we're going to have some kind of school. It may not be the experience that we are all used to. It may not be, either going, to live somewhere else and to do that completely. We may have to be remote for a little while longer. But I do want, folks to know that, we're working hard to make sure that the state universities and the city universities have a plan to continue to operate and help people achieve, their educational goals, in the fall. And so my colleagues can speak about what's happening on the city level with respect to public school, but for sure, from a safety perspective, everyone is working and certainly will be working over the summer to come up with a plan that allows for people to come back to school safely into the school buildings when they are deemed safe, and hopefully the virus period passes and we're able to return. So
thank you.
We want everybody to continue with their school plans and not lose any time, because we know that's really important for our young people.
Definitely.
Thank you. Thank you.
I'm being accepted for
Thank you.
college.
Congratulations, man. Congrats. So we have one more question, and this question is from Raheem, and then we'll go and I'll introduce my partner in crime for the Youth Opportunity Hub, Miss Janice Gilmore. This question, Raheem, is going to Council Member Diana Ayala. Raheem?
Good evening. How y'all doing? My name is Raheem. I'm representing Go So Safe. And my question is, ma'am, how has COVID-19 affected you personally?
Well, it's affected me tremendously actually when we shut down the city and went on pause. I became sick a few weeks later. My husband got sick, my mom got sick, my daughter was sick. So it was really just trying to understand what was happening, right? Because it was a very scary experience, not really knowing what the virus could do to you individually, and seeing what it was doing to other people. We were lucky that we didn't have any like respiratory issues, but we were sick for about 2 weeks, I would say. But it's also had, I would say, it's kind of flipped, right, my life personally and professionally, because now I'm used to going to work every day. We can no longer go to City Hall, so we've started transitioning to virtual hearings, just to ensure that we're meeting our mandate, and that's been really interesting and new. My staff is also working remotely from home, which is interesting, but has challenges as well, right? Because we're out there in the community trying to give out food and making sure that people have an adequate supply of masks. So it makes it very difficult to do that with a limited amount of staffers being able to go outside. Internally, I would say that for my house, we've done fairly well. I'm pleasantly surprised at how well my children and the family has dealt with it, but it definitely has a toll on a person's mental health. And I think especially for young people, as a mom of 3 young men that are still home, I am always concerned about what this means for their social emotional needs, and how they're affected by this, right? Because before COVID, you could go outside, you would go to school, and even if you didn't hang out, at least when you were in school, you kind of got whatever you needed to get out of your system out. You came home a little bit tired, you ate, and that was the wrap. Now that's not the way that it is, right? Now you're forced to stay home. We're not encouraging that you have people come over. We're hoping that you're not going to other people's homes, so that you're not bringing and taking and transmitting things between folks. And that's been really, really scary, right? Because we want to I want to make sure that my boys are happy, but at the same time I can't give them that right now, right? I have to make sure right now that they're as happy as they can be, stuck at home, right? But at the same time, safe from any illness that maybe they might not be able to recover from. And I think that this is an important point to make to young people, because I think initially a lot of young people, there was the language that was being used, and the promotional material that we were seeing on TV pretty much gave us the impression that young people did not get sick, right? And that's not true. Young people do get sick. They get sick a lot. The problem is that a lot of you don't have symptoms, right? And so you're walking around thinking that you're healthy and you're infecting other people. And so we want to make sure that you're not sick. We want to make sure that you don't, unintentionally bring something home that can harm, grandma or maybe your immune compromised mom. We want to make sure, especially now with the little babies, right? If you have brothers and sisters at home that are smaller, that was another conversation that was had, right? That this virus did not like children. That is also not true, right? We're seeing more and more little kids get sick, and so all of this is, has had a personal, and professional effect, I think, on all of us. I'm not the exception. I'm, unfortunately, the rule. But we're working through it, and I think the important thing is to really, to try to engage in different activities to promote, take care of me and take care of my mental health, so that I'm able to better take care of you and the community.
Thank you.
Thank you, Diana. We have one more question that was specifically for you, Ms. Ayala, and this question is from Ms. Natasha Rodriguez. Natasha?
All right, hello. My question is, like, this whole remote learning thing, the whole remote thing has affected all of us, but it's like affected very hard special needs kids. Like, personally, I know that certain therapies are like very hard to do at home, like occupational therapy and physical therapy, because in reality we don't have the specific equipment to necessarily fully satisfy that need. So what specifically is like being done to help us?
Yeah. So I know the DOE. I'm sorry. Let me make sure I'm not muted. The DOE has been working, really hard to develop a comprehensive plan to better meet the needs of children that have disabilities or different abilities and have, challenges and maybe learn differently or require physical therapy, right? Physical therapy is actually something that's still being done in most cases. I have people coming in and out of my home, all of the time. And I have a nephew that, has a disability, and he's still able to get, certain services. But some services, I think we were really late to the table to kind of figure out like what is the best approach, right? And we just were not, ready in terms of the technology. We just didn't have, the proper equipment, because nobody really anticipated anything like this ever happening. So I think that this is also a lesson for all of us, right? That we need to be prepared under every circumstance, but it's definitely a huge priority for us. And we hope to be hosting a hearing soon with the Department of Education to learn a little bit more about what those new and creative, ways of teaching look like, and how does that translate into the fall?
Thank you so much, Council Member. So we want to pause there and first give a thank you to each and every one of our elected officials for taking time out today to connect with you guys. Thank you guys so much. I want to thank all of our youth ambassadors for your wonderful questions. I know that we didn't get an opportunity to ask all of them, but they have received them, they have emailed them, and I'm pretty sure our elected officials will have no problem answering your questions. I want to give this time now to pass it over to my partner, the regional director of the East Harlem Youth Opportunity Hub, Ms. Janice Gilmore, who will discuss exactly what the hub is and upcoming programs, and then we'll pass it to me, and then we'll close it out. Ms. Gilmore?
Yes, good evening, everyone. You finally get a chance to see who I am. And once again, just piggybacking off of what Michael has said, I just want to thank you guys being in this position as leaders, young people as being leaders, as well as our elected officials. I want to say thank you once again. You guys mean a lot to us in the movement of what East Harlem and what our 5 boroughs have before them. So I just want to say thank you to each of you, and as well as our leadership for providing us the opportunity at Union Settlement, to David Nocenti, to Ms. Sheila Wells, to Herbert, to Dr. Rich, and so forth at Union Settlement, once again, for allowing this platform for us. As you guys know, the Hub is a program that, we have partnerships with different organizations in the community. As you know, you guys are part of it. SCAN, BCNY, Iris House, SAVE, KR3T. So I just want to say thank you to those partnerships that we do have that are allotted, the programs that we do provide for you guys. We work with youth from ages from 10 to 24. We provide GED program, but currently right now we're doing a lot of program virtually, which includes some of our free virtual OSHA trainings that you could reach out to us about, the Career Academy and supportive services. Like our councilwoman, Ms. Diana Ayala has mentioned, there are food services within Union Settlement that we are, still providing food and services to the seniors and to the community in East Harlem as well. We also provide intense case management to our youth and our participants. So that's kind of a gist of what we do. But like I said, once again, I just want to say thank you to you guys. And as we move forward, by June 1st, we will be having a lot more of our program available to you guys virtually by June 1st. So just please look out for that on our Union Settlement page. And we just want to say thank you within the community and just for you guys to stay safe during your time here. So thank you once again, and I'm gonna pass it back on to Michael.
Thank you, Janice. I just want to say, on behalf of Union Settlement, the East Harlem Youth Opportunity Hub, we want to give a huge thank you to our elected officials. Thank you, Gail Brewer. Thank you, Host Senator Serrano. Thank you, Councilmember Diana Ayala. Thank you, Assemblyman Robert Rodriguez. Huge shout out to our partners on this one, KR3TS, Keep Rising to the Top, Boys Club of New York, Jerry Clubhouse, Save East Harlem, Scan Harbor, Children's Aid Society, and Youth Action Youth Bill, who's I'm an alumni from. Thank you guys for this wonderful leadership opportunity. And like we shared with you guys, young people, leadership is what's going to change the world. New York City is one of the best places where you can express your leadership. And for you guys taking the time today preparing for this Zoom town hall to connect with the stakeholders in our community gives us hope. And it gives the people that are watching you guys a lot of hope that we're going to be in a great place. So on behalf of the East Harlem Youth Opportunity Hub, we're signing out. Thank you very much and have a great day. Bye, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Good job.